Hey everybody, welcome to our latest SwampCast in recruiting. I'm Robbie, Andreu, the beat writer for the Gainesville Sun and Gatorsports.com. And with me, Graham Hall, the recruiting expert / guru who's been busy the last 2 months or whatever with all this recruiting stuff. But, you know, Graham, they got through the first phase, which was have a very good early signing period. Then the next goal was to put together a staff, have it ready to go for the third phase, and they've done that. The staff is together now, ready to go out and recruit.
Absolutely. Being one of the only staffs I can think of in the SEC that's complete as the contact period opens back up is huge for Florida, especially when they've had a chance to reevaluate their board, see the positions they need, and they've hired a lot of guys who already have pre-established relationships with some of the top recruits that they're
That is crucial, Graham, because it is relationships. These guys aren't going to jump and play for a stranger. They want to play with somebody they know something about.
I think the biggest one that you can immediately look at is Christian Robinson, the young linebackers coach, just 27 years old, very well known in the state of Georgia, played on that team back in 2012. In between,
he's a dog.
Alec Ogletree, yeah, but he has big relationships with guys that Florida's after, including Caleb Tanner and Quay Walker. Two linebackers, they're in prime position to flip from other places. Caleb Tanner actually decommitted from Georgia prior to the early signing period, and Quay Walker remains committed to Alabama, but a strong relationship with Trey Dean and Robinson could lead him to be a Gator. He'll take an official visit here in that final weekend, February 2nd, and I think that they're in a prime position.
Well, and that would be big, Graham, because linebackers a huge need when you look at what's on the roster now, the fact they only signed one in the early signing period, right?
Yeah.
Reese, so it's a huge need. If they could get that guy to flip, it's huge. Very big for a position of need.
And not to mention the 4 linebackers that they signed last year all didn't see the field for Florida. So if they can get some of these highly recruited guys who are already, you know, big names and established in the state of Florida and in the Southeast, I think that that's big for them.
Yeah, it definitely is. And speaking of assistant coaches, Sider's taken on a new role. He's probably the best recruiter on the former staff. He probably will be on this one. Does the change in position affect him in any way, or
not really?
He's still going to go out and get guys.
Yeah, he'll still be involved in. I mean, they're all going to be involved in all aspects of coaching. All offensive coaches will, you know, have a say.
Yeah.
But when you look at Juwan Sider, he was responsible for 5 of the 13 early signings that Florida landed. That is just a huge disparity compared to everyone else.
Yeah, he can recruit.
It was absolutely a priority for them to retain him. Now, people see tight ends coach and don't think that a rising coach like him is going to be on the staff next year. I don't think that's necessarily true, and he gives them a hot hand leading up to early signing day. He's one of the best recruiters in the state of Florida for a reason, and I think that it was definitely a priority for Mullen to keep him and get a guy like Greg Knox, who has established a relationship with a lot of these top running backs already.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a real good addition to the staff. I think he's going to be a good recruiter and a good coach to get production out of those running backs. So it's a big hire for them. And Graham, as far as putting together the staff. This week they kind of do in-home visits. Is that what it is? Or they can call, but then the following weekend is the first big weekend visit.
Yeah, it's
on campus.
They can show up at a kid's door if they want, banging and trying to talk to them. But really, that weekend they're going to spend a lot of time going in-home with some of these top prospects. I expect them to take a visit to see Jacob Copeland, some other of those top guys. Quay Walker should be seen unless he's on campus somewhere else. I really think that they're going to try and talk to Will Bards, Ed Mondelis. They're going to start talking to a pair of Apopka offensive linemen who have become a priority for John Hevesi, because that is another position of need.
Oh, it is.
Which leads me back to, I think, the biggest recruit that they can get in the next 3 weeks, Nicholas Petit-Ferry, who's going to be on campus, hopefully January 26th for Florida. Hopefully
he lasts that long.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think he will, because I've heard he's a real smart kid that wants to go through the process, and academics are big for him. So if they can get him to hang on,
yeah. And I think that they're going to compete with Ohio State and Alabama to the wire with him. But I think that Florida getting the only visit as an in-state prospect for him is huge. I really think that Florida's in a prime position to get him, and if you look at his skill, he is definitely the top offensive lineman in this class.
Yeah, and you look at his frame, Graham, he's not real heavy right now. You can build him up and bulk him up, get him in the weight room, and he's going to be a special player, I think.
Absolutely. Could play any position on the offensive line, and that's huge for John Hevesi to have a guy like him, especially when you consider Florida's had the depth at the offensive line position for the last few years, but they necessarily haven't had the numbers that they're looking for at each position, especially the tackle position, because you look at a guy like Martez Ivey seemingly playing out of position. I think that getting another guy like that who can play anywhere on the offensive line will only boost Florida. And he's a guy who's going to play as a freshman.
Yeah, and it's like running backs in this conference. You cannot have too many running backs or too many linemen. It's like you always run out, and you need depth. You need guys that come in there in waves to keep people fresh. But Graham, one guy that everybody keeps asking me about is Copeland, the receiver, who was committed, decommitted. I think a lot of people think he's falling in love with Alabama right now, but I think Florida's in there pretty good with him.
Absolutely. But, I mean, if you look at how Alabama's freshman wide receivers did in the national championship game, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, both had catches in the national championship game as freshmen. that is probably the biggest factor that's appealing to Jacob Copeland right now. And Nick Saban gave him a phone call right after.
I know, that was good timing.
I mean, that's kind of what Jim McElwain did after the SEC championship game with Eddie Pinheiro, and you know how big of an effect that had on him. So when you look at Jacob Copeland's recruitment, I think that it is going to come down to Alabama or Florida. I don't think he's a guy who's going to wind up at Tennessee. He has some prior relationships with UF's recruiting guys, especially Billy Gonzalez has reached out to him and went in home with him and kind of laid out how he wants to use Jacob Copeland, which is huge. So I really think that it's going to come down to the wire for him, but I think Florida is in the best position to land him, mainly because of his relationship with Emory Jones. Yeah, they've got on him and stayed on him. And you met Emory Jones. What was he like as a person when you were at the Under Armour All-American game? What was he like, and what do you think fans are going to think of him when he gets here? Very mature. He's ready to come in and work. He's a guy who expects to be the starting quarterback, but he knows that it's not going to be handed to him. He wants to add muscle to his frame. They're probably going to look to get him to add about 15 pounds of muscle when he gets in here, which will actually improve with his accuracy, which was kind of an issue at the Under Armour game. I mean, there were 20-mile-per-hour winds out there, so no one who has elite zip on their ball is going to have absolute accuracy 100% of the time. But Emory Jones is a guy who is ready to compete. He knows what the expectations are in Florida. He knows that the job's not going to be handed to him, and he's already talking to Felipe Franks, Kyle Trask, Luke Del Rio about what the job entails. So he's a guy who's going to give it 100% already on campus, and that's a very promising sign for any young QB. And I would read nothing into his performance in that game. One, he didn't get many opportunities. Two, he's playing for a guy he's not going to be playing for now in an offense that he won't be playing in. So I wouldn't judge him by that at all. Anybody that's worried about that, don't. Yeah, it's not really a factor. The winds out there were crazy. The cold out there was definitely a factor, and he knew that. I mean, this is a week where you can't really develop an offensive game plan, and everything's kind of changing on the fly. He only got 4 passing attempts, I think maybe even less than that, and there were other factors in there as well that led to him not having a great showing. But he's a guy who, if anything, that poor performance is going to fuel him. Well, yeah, and believe me, he's coming to a coach in an offense where you're going to see his skill come out. Yeah, absolutely. A lot has been made about Dan Mullen's offense not being pass-oriented, but if you look at a guy like Willie Taggart, actually, Mullen's offenses recently have been a lot more pass-oriented than Willie Taggart's. Oh, yeah, no doubt. And that was a factor, certainly, in his recruitment. So I think that anyone who's worried about Emory Jones being an elite passer just has to know that he's going to be used in the right situations. Yeah. And they envisioned – there was a reason Mullen got in the door when he was 14 years old. There's no doubt about it. I think he's been dreaming about how he's going to use Emory Jones for the last 3 years. And Graham, another Georgia guy that has signed and sealed, Trey Dean. Yes. It seemed to me he had a great game, a guy that can play all kinds of positions back there. Yeah, absolutely a physical defensive back. He could play safety. He could play the nickel. I think he ideally is a corner. He has great coverage skills, great ball skills. Is very physical. Does not shy away from contact. At 6'3", already 220-something pounds. He is a very, very physical corner. He's got NFL lineage. He's cousin to Ahmad Black. His other cousin, they're not really sure how they're related, is Amari Cooper, Oakland Raiders receiver. Bloodlines there, I'll tell you. Absolutely. You got to say that athleticism definitely runs in their family. Trey Dean, it's kind of amazing that Florida didn't lock him up sooner, because when you think of all the factors that could have led him here, he wanted to come here as a sophomore. Florida didn't really prioritize him, and that kind of is the biggest indictment of the previous staff that I can think of. I mean, you look at this guy, he is one of those guys that just gets it, knows how to play, and it's obvious the way he plays. Absolutely. So. I think that when you look down the line in a few years, he's going to be one of those absolute steals that Florida you're going to look at, like, how did they get this guy wrapped up in just a week? And Graham, another guy down there, McPherson, the kicker. What did you see of him? Did you get much of a feel for how good he could be? And didn't get a big feel on what he could be. I mean, when you look at his stats, he owns the Florida high school record for longest kick, 60-yarder. But I got to say, accuracy definitely is a concern for him. I don't know how much they want to work on him in terms of mechanics. Greg Knox will be the special teams coordinator. And he's a good one, too, Knox. And they're going to have some guys training with him during the summer that can work on some of his mechanics. But I definitely got to say that he's not going to come in and put up Eddie Pinheiro numbers right away. I think there will be a kicking battle between him and Jorge Powell. But Evan McPherson absolutely has the leg to exceed at the next level. If he can put the accuracy together, he's a complete package. Yeah, he could be very special. And Graham, the first visiting week, big weekend is next week. And how many guys do you think are going to come in? Who's the big guy that comes in next week? I think they're going to have about 2 to 4 guys come in. I think the big name to watch is Justin Watkins. He's a 6-foot wide receiver, plays like he's much bigger than that, from Citra, Florida. kind of a local guy if you think about that. He probably grew up a Gator fan. Emory Jones and him are pretty close. They definitely developed a rapport during the Under Armour week. I think that Florida will wrap him up when they get him on campus next week. I know that he has definitely had an eye on the Florida program for a while.
Florida does seem to be trending upward with this kid.
And I think that all the signs are that they're going to get him locked up by next week. He'll be on campus. They got a couple other guys coming in. The list is still a little bit fluid, but the biggest weekend is probably going to be the last one. And that if you're a Florida fan, getting the last visit,
it's always
these guys is the biggest one. So knowing that they're going to have 7 official visitors at least on campus on February 2nd is massive.
The key is getting them to that last week without committing. But these are guys that have waited and didn't sign early, so I think they will wait, and they're going to go through all their visits and then make their calls.
Well, it's 2 more weeks when you want to make
exactly.
You're going to make the right
decision. You've waited this long. Go ahead and go through the process and get it done.
Yep.
Well, Graham, you're going to be very busy the next 2 or 3 weeks, and so will I, so it'll be fun. It's always cool to follow recruiting, and Graham's going to have plenty of stuff in the paper and online, and look forward to that, and we'll come back with another SwampCast real soon for you guys, okay? Until then, we'll see you later.